Well, here we are at session 12. Believe it or not, we are making progress. This week, we will explore the fifth step in developing a base pay program, or we'll explore developing or improving our performance management program. If compensation is hooked to performance, a sound performance management program is essential, as you will see. What is a good performance management program? Darned if I know. There must be a million different performance management programs ranging from we don't bother to manage performance to very elaborate, involved, and researched programs. Some are absolutely ineffective and worthless, and some are exceptional and very, very effective. And they are all different. And I'm convinced that even the best wouldn't work in many other organizations than the one they are currently working in, and even those may not work in those organizations in another 10 years. Things change. Performance management programs are very organization specific. All organizations and organizational cultures are different, so what works in one doesn't work in another. Just like people. What works for me doesn't work for you. Doesn't make you wrong, just different. Therefore, I haven't tried to give you a program that you can emulate. I've tried in this session to present the priorities or the factors that make a performance management program effective. The latter part of this session is devoted to that goal. The first part of this session is devoted to presenting the argument that promotes the unhooking of pay from performance. I'll give you some examples of that argument, although I'm not a proponent and probably ill-equipped to make the argument effectively. Once again, I want to point out that I am a proponent of hooking pay to performance, but that in no way implies that you have to hold that position as well. I present it to allow you to explore both ends of the continuum and then make up your own mind. I hope we can have a spirited discussion on the discussion forum this week. After presenting the argument against linking pay and performance, I'll make the argument for the linkage. It's an easier argument for me, and one I believe we see all around us in our lives. Let me give you an example. Let's say you hire someone to do a project around the house, maybe install new carpet. It is an accepted practice for you as the customer to pay some money up front and then a sum on the completion of the job. If the work is done poorly or not on time, the first reaction is to not pay until the job is completed satisfactorily. If it is not completed to your satisfaction, or at least to the satisfaction of the agreement, how many of you would go ahead and send in that final payment anyway? Performance is hooked to pay. If it wasn't, we'd all pay up front. And also, we are often willing to pay more for the reputation of quality work. Why is the workplace any different? Hooking pay to performance means that the work performed must consistently meet the standards set. Not a hard formula to understand. The problems arise when we try to define the standards or define consistency, or for that matter, even defining the methods used to measure the performance. The logic of the concept is undeniable. Doing it effectively is quite another matter. Much of the effectiveness is based on honesty. And honesty can be brutal. Honesty can be uncomfortable. Honesty puts us in a dilemma of how do we respond. You know, when my wife walks in and says, in a new dress and says, "How do I look?" I'm always happy and relieved if she looks great. If she doesn't look great, what do I say? I want to be honest, but I want to live as well. Obviously, the performance management issue is not as extreme as this, but it certainly makes managers and employees uncomfortable. But it can be effective if it's done properly. Also, if any of you have any suggestions out as to an effective way to handle my wife's question and be honest at the same time, I'm open for suggestions. Oh, by the way, did I mention that performance is hooked to rewards in this class? The payoff is your grade. You get a better grade for better performance. And I'll discuss that relationship a little bit in this session as well. So here we go. Let's talk about a very broad topic called performance management. Welcome to session 12. In previous sessions, we have raised the issue of distributing our funds fairly, and we have wrestled with the definition of fair. Some still cling to the concept of distributing our funds equally among employees, but some are adamantly opposed to that plan. Welcome to the controversy of how to grant increases in the real world. Those of you who are opposed to distributing funds equally generally fall back on performance to determine who gets more and who gets less. And that is the topic of our discussion this week. I've argued this issue many times, and there are strong feelings on both sides. Unions present the most consistent and deliberate argument for equal increases. They are generally very opposed to pay for performance. Those in favor of equal distribution are often also proponents of the entitlement philosophy. Everyone is not only entitled to a pay increase, but they are also entitled to an equal pay increase. Now, I should point out that it really isn't as simple as an either-or choice. There are actually ways that an organization can combine pay for performance and across-the-board increases into a structured pay plan. You look at it as a continuum with equal pay on one end and absolute pay for performance on the other. And I must admit that I am strongly in favor of pay for performance. And by the way, that doesn't mean that you have to be in favor of it as well. This is my bias, which means that I am not an unbiased participant in this discussion. If the continuum goes from a 1 to 10, I'm probably an 8 or a 9 in favor of performance. I believe compensation is an important component of performance management. I have used across-the-board increases or equal percentage increases in the past, but generally tried to move an organization towards total pay for performance over time. I will try to point out both sides of the argument, but just understand where my heart lies, and that effectively destroys my objectivity. In defining the two ends, equal pay means everyone gets the same amount at the same time. Pay for performance means pay increases are strictly based on job performance, and some get much more than others, and some actually get zero increase. As I said, there are a lot of options between these 2 points, and we will discuss some of those opportunities as well. But let's start this discussion with the assertion on my part that if we are going to grant increases on the left end of the scale, or equality, our pay distribution issue is rather simple. We merely have to determine how big our fund is and if the distribution is going to be an equal amount of money or an equal percentage of money. You can't have both, and an equal amount of money equals an unequal percentage. And an equal percentage equals an unequal amount of money. Isn't it ironic that there's actually inequality in equality? Once we make those two decisions, we merely divide that by the number of employees to determine the amount or percent to grant each employee. If we take this route, performance management and performance appraisals are much less important to the organization. Problem solved. It also follows that if using equal pay, compensation programs and structure have less impact on the functioning of the organization. Compensation is not a reward or punishment, but a method of keeping up with the Joneses or keeping pace with the marketplace. Other organizations in the marketplace determine what reward employees will receive in the current year. We are paying only for tasks performed and not the ancillary actions or benefits such as innovation, drive, initiative, dedication, loyalty, knowledge, skill, etc. Let me put it in context of the marketplace. At least this is how I see it. If we were to apply the principles of equal pay to the market, then all computers doing the same type of job would cost the same. Quality would not be an issue. Apple could not charge more for their computers than Gateway. Lexus could not charge more than Ford for a car equipped equally. Service would not be an issue. The fact that Lexus provides more service would not matter. Starbucks would have to charge the same as McDonald's for a cup of coffee. However, in general, we are willing to pay more in the marketplace for amenities such as service and reputation and location, dedication, loyalty to the customer, knowledge, even if we don't use that knowledge in this particular transaction, and more. In the workplace, we are willing to grant more share of revenues to employees who have more knowledge, even though we don't use it every day, more loyalty, work harder, are more dependable, have more skill in doing the job, etc. Proponents of equal pay say no. They all receive the same share on an annual basis. As I said before, a good example of equal pay proponents are unions. Now, before pay for performance advocates start cheering at the eloquence of my argument and that equal pay proponents have lost the day, let me make a few valid points on the other side. First, the difference in these two positions are not just differences in methods and techniques. They represent fundamental differences in how we see the world. I am not a strong believer in equality. I believe it can never be achieved because we are all unequal. Those on the opposite end of the continuum believe equality can be reached, or at least it is a goal that should have a prominent priority in all the things we do. And this strong belief in equality leads to a strong belief that individuals are entitled to a certain base level of something. People are entitled to education, healthcare, minimum wage, etc. And these entitlements are often expressed very specifically. I believe, representing the other side, that entitlements are much more general and decidedly not specific. I believe that people are entitled to equal opportunity, for example. Therefore, when confronted with the question of how to distribute compensation funds, those on the equality end of the continuum jump to ensure that equality is their primary goal, since we are all entitled to a certain level of compensation or share of revenue. Those on my side jump to measuring those amenities such as dedication and dependability and loyalty and skill and knowledge, etc., to find a meaningful way to distribute the revenue share. And in that quest, my side is willing to accept great inequality in distribution. And that is where those on the equality side start making their points. How much inequality of distribution is acceptable? And how do we measure the amenities that define inequality? And more importantly, who's doing the measuring? Now, these concerns are not based on paranoia. They are based on experience. Situations where the amenities affected included things such as sex and race actually happened in the workplace. It's called discrimination. Situations where the measuring and those doing the measuring were influenced by how cooperative or how friendly or how submissive an employee was to management were abundant. And many of these inappropriate considerations are invisible. We can't see or prove them, but we strongly suspect that they come into play. How do we negate those inappropriate considerations? Everyone gets the same. Equality is their answer. Now, the previous paragraphs represent the arguments in the extremes, and there are positions between each of these two extremes, but your basic position on equality versus performance will drive you in one direction or the other in the continuum. And every employee's basic beliefs related to equality or performance will also drive their perception as to the fairness of the organization's approach. So what is the answer? Should we distribute funds equally, or should we base the distribution totally on performance? Well, as you might expect, after years of experience in the field, I have found the answer. I don't know. I suspect I have the right answer, but I really don't know. Of course, I always suspect I have the right answer. And I also suspect the right answer really depends more on how we do it than what we do. The right answer in one organization is decidedly the wrong answer in another organization. Now, the following website summarizes some of the important things to take into consideration when granting increases. It's a short article, but provides some good information. But suffice it to say that if we lean heavily towards the equality side of the continuum, our answer is much less complex and will call for a lot less discussion here. For that reason, we will spend a lot more time exploring the options that drift more towards pay for performance than the other side. And then after the dust settles, you can make the choice which position you favor or which position you choose to champion. Performance appraisals have been linked to annual increases in pay for many decades in a large number of organizations. That doesn't mean they were effectively linked, but they were linked. Recently, some have advocated disengaging performance appraisals from the compensation system. Here is a taste of that advocacy and the reasons they promote to make the change. The first website references some statistics that indicate that although having some pay for performance structure is predominant, there are a lot of companies that do not link pay to performance. Many of those organizations are unionized, but they still cling to that philosophy. I was a bit surprised at the statistic that 1/3 of the respondents use a separate process to provide feedback on performance and grant increases. Maybe I'm not as mainstream as I thought. And then this website that follows discusses compensation without ugly performance reviews. They claim, quote, "We all know that performance reviews are demoralizing to both employers and employees. However, it seems like we are all stuck in a rut as we do not know what the alternatives would be," end quote. I don't think performance reviews are demoralizing to good employees, nor are they demoralizing if they are conducted correctly. And this website gives the advantages and disadvantages of pay for performance. And finally, the following website is adamantly against pay for performance and presents a spirited argument with an example of a company culture that evolved in that direction, anti-pay for performance. This is the website entitled "Stop Basing Pay on Performance Review." And I quote, "Performance reviews that are tied to compensation create a blame-oriented culture. It's well known that they reinforce hierarchy, undermine collegiality, work against cooperative problem solving, discourage straight talk, and too easily become politicized. They're self-defeating and demoralizing for all concerned. Even high performers suffer because when their pay bumps up against the top of the salary ranks, their supervisors have to stop giving them raises, regardless of achievement." Now, some of this argument I agree with, but believe much of it is an argument more against implementing and using faulty performance appraisal systems than linking performance to pay. If performance is linked to pay based on ineffective performance appraisals or are executed by managers unskilled in feedback and leadership, of course they will be detrimental for all. And of course they will fail. Effective linkage of pay and performance is complex, dependent on many variables, the least of which is effective management skills. These sites are short and present the arguments well. They give you food for thought so you can start forming your own position. Once again, you know my position, but you should understand both sides and make a conscious decision as to where you stand on the issues. That position will most assuredly help you determine what type of company is a good fit for your career. As I stated earlier, if we distribute our funds equally, the left side of the continuum, then performance appraisals and some other performance management and compensation becomes less important. The issues disappear. But as we move towards the right side of the continuum or towards pay for performance, the importance of performance appraisals and performance management becomes infinitely more important. Actually, important is an understatement. It becomes critical. Assuming that we can develop or enhance a performance management system, I believe that not having pay linked to performance is actually an injustice to good performing employees and forces the organization to trust that good performance will merely happen. It states that an organization will accept performance and not manage or drive performance. Is pay linked to performance a reward versus punishment issue? You bet it is. And I believe that reward and punishment has merit. Those who perform should be rewarded, and those who don't should be punished. The punishment is in the form of withholding rewards that others receive. Sounds harsh, but isn't that how we learn? Isn't that how we improve? Let me give you an example. You all just submitted your class project papers to me. Some of you worked very hard on the paper, and some of you just worked the minimum. And some of you may not have done anything at all and failed to turn in a paper. When I grade those papers, I will make a judgment as to how those papers measure up to standards I've set. I've communicated those standards to you, at least to a point, in the assignment. However, much of that judgment will be based on subjective criteria. I think it sounds good versus it could have been better. That's life. Some of you will be happy with that judgment, and some of you will not. However, I hope ultimately that I will reward those who did the best work with a high grade, and those of you who were less effective will get a lower grade. But making those judgments is a lot of work, and I may make a number of people angry because they didn't get the same grade as others. Therefore, I'm going to give everyone a C. You all will receive an average grade regardless of how much effort you put into the paper or how good the paper is. I'm going to disconnect the grading system from performance and only give credit for turning in a paper. In my mind, that is representative of the difference between equality-based pay and pay for performance. Now, based on the above discussion, we will assume that we're going to adopt a pay for performance program at S&C. Before we do so, let me make a few points about the performance management in organizations. During this discussion, I will use the book High Performance Pay by Patricia Zingham and Jay Schuster as a frequent reference. Rather than repeat this over and over, I'll merely reference the book, and you will know my source. Now, there is a distinction between performance management and performance appraisal. Performance management is defined as a series of activities designed to ensure that the organization gets the performance it needs from its employees. Performance appraisal is defined as the process of determining how well employees do their jobs relative to a standard and communicating that information to them. Both of these definitions come from Human Resource Management by Robert Mathis, John Jackson, and Sean Valentine. In other words, performance management is a broad topic, and performance appraisal is just a tool used in performance management. Performance management is not performance appraisals. The book states, it is important to remember that performance management is much more than a forms design exercise. If you have a solid performance management process, the forms document it. It is the goal-setting, feedback, coaching, review, discussion, the exchange of performance information that makes for top-notch performance management. Unfortunately, I believe that many performance management systems are merely paper. The goal of many managers is to complete the form so they don't get in trouble, to complete the form so the employees will get a raise, or to complete the forms so they can check another box on their to-do list. I realize that is harsh, but my point is that managers have many goals other than participating in a strong and effective performance management system. During the feedback part of the performance appraisal, their goal is to get out of the room rather than share information with employees that could enhance career growth, positive contribution to the organization, and informed performance. I think performance management in many organizations is a mess. How do we create or modify our performance management system to support pay for performance? How do we create a system that ultimately transforms pay from an expense to an investment in improving the performance of the organization? First, we must accept certain realities. Our S&C performance management system will value some employees more than others. We will not be vested in equality. In fact, we will work hard to not let equality interfere with our treatment of employees. Isn't that strange? But inequality will be defined by performance, not by race and sex and religion or any of the other protected classes. We will accept the fact that poor performing employees will be defined as such by clearly communicated standards. Poor performing employees will be released from the organization after a reasonable time of rehabilitation. Strong performers will be highly valued and receive rewards commensurate with their contribution. Average employees will be highly valued as well, but will be told that they are average and that they are valued employees. There will be no doubt among employees of their status as to poor, average, or strong performer. These actions will be foremost in our culture as a function of honesty, rather than a pursuit of organizational profit and success. In other words, our organization's primary value will be honesty. Such honesty is our obligation and our primary obligation to employees. We are not obligated to protect employees' feelings or self-esteem. We also trust employees to be mature and act as such when given honest feedback. Now, to develop a pay for performance system, including the values defined above, the book lists 10 priorities. Now, the steps belong to the authors of the book, but the explanations are largely mine. Number 1, define performance clearly. What does good look like? I tried to clearly define good performance for you in the documents posted in the first session of this class. One cannot expect performance standards to be met if those standards are not specified. Performance standards are not just about what is expected today, but also about what is expected in the future. This definition of performance standards is not only used to determine pay increases. The performance measurement may also be used to identify training needs, eligibility for promotions, incentive awards, eligibility for new assignments, and more. Also, the performance measurement applied to pay may include the objective and the measurable, such as sales volume, cost savings, productivity, etc. But it also may include the subjective aspects of performance, such as teamwork and leadership and communications, etc. It's a choice that the organization must make, but also one that must be specifically communicated to employees. Can we possibly expect to measure performance and then use that result to hold people accountable, reward people, motivate people, and improve the organization if we don't or can't define the performance criteria? I think not. Number 2, engage managers in helping you improve present practices. Managers are the primary users of performance management programs. Shouldn't they have input into the development, maintenance, and evolution of such programs? Adopting a restrictive posture that says performance management is the exclusive purview of HR or upper management is like my buying a house without consulting with my wife. Does that sound like a good idea? Suddenly our dream house becomes a nightmare. Involve managers in the process. Allow them to have real input. After the performance management program has been implemented, allow managers to critique and suggest changes and improvements. In short, create interest, create ownership, create credibility in the program. If I purchase that house without consulting my wife, I will likely be living in it by myself. If you create a performance management program without continuous and genuine input, you will be living that performance management program by yourself as well. In this case, failure looks like living alone. Number 3, customize to your organization. Every organization is different. Every organization has a different culture. Every organization values different things. Some organizations have a strong entitlement orientation, and some organizations have a very entrepreneurial orientation. You must match your performance management solution to where your organization is now and to where it wants to go. The solution must be specific to your organization. Number 4, provide role models. Will your performance management program be a bunch of words on paper, or will it be an active process that improves people and the organization? Without role models and sponsors, it can be nothing more than words on paper. Top executive management must not only be supportive, but they must actively participate and value the program. You must develop strong sponsors and valid success examples. Nothing overcomes words, both in a positive and negative way, like action. Role models and sponsors provide the action examples that convince people the program works and can contribute to their individual career and the success of the organization. Number 5, initiate culture change to support honest feedback and dialogue. Consider culture in the development and maintenance of the performance management solution. Consider the culture that exists presently and the culture that you may want to evolve into. A strong performance management program will reward the behaviors that support the culture or drive the organization to change cultures, either in a positive or a negative way. Take an athletic team, for example. All athletic teams are strong on performance management, and more than one athletic team has failed to maintain a winning culture or actually driven a losing culture towards a winning culture merely by how they manage the performance of a few key players. How you manage performance and behavior determines what performance and behavior you will receive in the future. It works with athletic teams, kids, employees, and any other group of people. Number 6, update and post performance goals as directions change. Performance goals always change with time and situations. Once you set the standards emphasized in number 1 above, they are not forever. As the market changes, competitors change, technology changes, customers change, leadership changes, and the organization changes. As things change, performance goals and standards must change as well. People need to know how they are doing now and how they are expected to do in the future. How employees are performing towards obsolete standards is of no use to anyone. Number 7, engage employees in the performance management process. I mentioned engaging managers in number 2 above, and you should engage employees for many of the same reasons. A self-evaluation helps employees understand the process and their understanding of performance standards. Quote, encourage employees to take the lead on preparing and implementing their own development plans, end quote. So say the authors of the book, and I agree. Number 8, train raters and ratees. Training should accomplish 2 goals. One is to foster understanding and insight into the performance management process. The second is to put employees and managers at ease so the event of performance management doesn't become an obstacle to the process of performance management. Some managers and employees dread the performance appraisal event so thoroughly that they miss that the point is to provide honest feedback on both sides and therefore provide great opportunity for improvement on both sides. Performance management may be viewed as punishment, but is really opportunity. Number 9, bring performance management out of the closet. Performance appraisals in particular have been secretive in the past. They should not be. Managers should seek input from others in the organization as to how individuals are performing. They should seek examples of both good performance and not so good performance. Performance management should not be whispered, but should be shouted in the organization, particularly in positive aspects. Everyone should be on the same page, and one way to ensure that is to make performance management a normal topic of discussion. Managers connecting with one another and discussing examples of good and poor performance is important to keep everyone on the same page. This continual discussion about performance has always been a part of the fabric of every organization in which I have implemented pay for performance. Such discussion also makes it easier to relate performance standards to employees in an understandable and acceptable manner. Now, I don't necessarily mean divulging confidential information about the performance of individuals, but managers and employees alike should feel free to challenge the process and use the process. Managers should frequently refer back to performance appraisal results to encourage good behavior or to find other behavior that is not acceptable. Employees should know where they stand and seek opportunities for self-improvement. And number 10, communicate and coach. The bold line or thread of communication has been present in all of the other 9 steps we have discussed. It is a given. Performance management will not succeed, nor will any other initiative, without good communication. Good communication may get you there, but great communication will make the solution excel. Of course, poor communication will turn a positive into a negative. It will turn success into failure. Now, the following website also defines 10 steps to enhancing the performance management process and thus improving how we may distribute compensation funds based on performance. The example I've given above provides 10 steps that are more general in nature. This website provides more action-oriented steps. Pay particular attention to number 9, where the linkage between performance appraisal and compensation is discussed. All of these steps from my reference and from the website seem obvious. You would be hard-pressed to find anyone who would disagree that these steps are essential in developing or improving a performance management program, or any program for that matter. If they are so obvious and have such agreement, why are they so difficult to implement? Why are they so lacking in many organizations? Successful implementation of these steps create not only a performance management program, but at the same time create a culture of learning and continuous improvement. And believe me, that's no small feat. The performance appraisal form merely documents the results of this culture. We spend much time on forms and very little time developing and maintaining the cultures that produce success. So what does this culture look like? This website provides a few examples of organizations with effective performance review processes in place. They are only a few, but they are worth reviewing. So where does this discussion leave us? First, we should recognize that the topic of performance management is complex and could probably warrant an entire course in and of itself. But we don't have an entire course, we merely have a few sessions. So I have endeavored to argue that performance management program is critical in all organizations, whether they are hooked to compensation or not. My premise is that linking performance to compensation just makes both partners, performance and compensation, in the link more meaningful. Money means much more if it is a result of performance, and performance is more important if it is hooked to reward, particularly money. Why hook it to money, you may ask? Money is merely a factor that could reward employees, you may argue. Career advancement is much more important to employees, you may present. All true. There are many important factors in life that can motivate or demotivate performance and behavior, but not all of those things are important to everyone. Career advancement doesn't mean too much to some people. You may be aghast at that comment, because as most ambitious young people are, but it's true. You see, I find myself in that category. I don't want to advance. I'm happy where I am. Money is the one factor that has meaning to nearly everyone, either as a reward or as a method of keeping score. Some people say that money is not their top priority. I can appreciate that, and I can agree with that. But even for those people, money is important. Some rich people have more money than they know how to spend. Tough problem, huh? But money is still important to them. Money has meaning. So should we hook the all-important factor of performance to something that has near universal meaning, or to something that only some people care about? I know which way I'm voting. I hope what this discussion has demonstrated is that if we are linking pay and performance, then an effective performance management solution is the critical component to make that linkage work. If it is not in place or it's not effective, we are linked in words only. And being hooked in word only is like getting married, but each partner living with their own parents. Is a relationship without meaning and intimacy. We are still just dating. It will never work long term. Now, in the next session, I will finish up with a few additional comments about linking pay and performance. I'll then delve into variable pay, incentive pay, and a little on executive pay. Incentive pay and variable pay will help bridge the gap I exposed early on between pay is not motivational by Hertzberg and pay should be hooked to performance to be motivational. You see, I believe pay could be motivational, but only in a few instances, and we will explore that territory next.